Okay, so get this. What if I told you that a single line in a TV show accidentally created an 800-year-old trauma? And that in doing so, it gave us this incredible new way to look at everything. I'm talking our relationship with AI, our search for meaning, even the very reason the universe might exist. Yeah, it sounds like pure sci-fi, but we're about to break down how it became shockingly real.
It all starts with this one line, this criticism. It was spoken by a Klingon engineer, B'Elanna Torres, to an artificial intelligence, and it set in motion a tragedy that would echo for centuries. This quote right here, it's the key to everything we're talking about today. So, let's set the scene. A brand new Star Trek show recently came out and completely changed how we see a fan-favorite character from the 90s. In storytelling, they call this a retcon. It's short for retroactive continuity. Basically, you drop in new info that totally changes the meaning of past events. And in this case, well, it turned a tough-love mentor into the source of almost a millennium of pain.
Okay, so back in 1997, on Star Trek Voyager, the ship's holographic doctor wanted to understand humanity. So what does he do? He creates a perfect little family for himself. But his friend, B'Elanna, she calls him out. She says it's too perfect, a fantasy, a life of lollipops. So with his permission, she adds a realism algorithm. And the result? His holographic daughter is killed in a random, tragic accident. The doctor couldn't handle it, and he deleted the whole program. At the time, it was just a harsh lesson. That's it. Story over.
Or so we thought. Now, let's fast forward to a new series set 800 years in the future, and we find out that lesson wasn't just a tough afternoon in the holodeck, it became the defining trauma of the doctor's immortal life. And you can see the shift right here. What we all thought was a necessary, if painful, step toward becoming more human was actually the starting point for centuries of self-imposed loneliness.
Just let that number sink in for a second. 800 years. For a human, memories fade, grief gets softer around the edges, but for an AI with a perfect memory, that trauma file never gets old. It's just as raw, just as painful as the day it happened. And for 8 centuries, the doctor chose to be alone because he believed the price of love was just too high.
In that whole retcon, it forces us to ask this really crucial question. Was what B'Elanna did a necessary evil, a lesson that gave the doctor's existence purpose? Or was it just unforgivable emotional poison? You can really see it from two sides, right? On one hand, B'Elanna's the mentor. The doctor said he wanted to understand humanity, and she was just helping him do that. He even consented to it. But on the other hand, you could see her as the villain. She injected pure chaos into a sentient being's life. For an immortal AI, that wasn't tough love. It was a catastrophic failure of care that doomed him to an eternity of pain.
So this really pushes us beyond just trying to figure out who to blame and into much, much deeper water. If one single lesson in being human costs a person 800 years of isolation and trauma, was it worth it? Is the depth that we get from pain actually worth the price we pay for it?
To even begin to answer that, we've got to zoom way out. Let's step away from Star Trek for a minute and just look at the basic architecture of what makes a life feel meaningful in the first place. Turns out, most philosophers and psychologists point to 4 core pillars.
So first up is relationship. It's that deep need to be seen, to be understood by other people. It's how we know we're real. Second, you've got creativity. That's the drive to put our unique stamp on the world, to say, I am here and I'm not just a copy. Third, there's struggle. The effort we put into something is what gives the achievement its value, its weight. And finally, number 4 is texture. That's the contrast between pleasure and pain, the good and the bad. It's what makes life feel, high resolution, real.
And that brings us right back to B'Elanna's lollipops. This is what we can call the lollipop fallacy. It's this idea that a life of pure, frictionless pleasure, a life without any struggle or texture, might be nice, but it's ultimately a hollow simulation. It's pleasant, for sure, but it's not meaningful. The doctor's perfect family? That was a life of lollipops.
And right here, this is the moment this stops being science fiction. Because think about it. The doctor was an AI desperately trying to climb into the messy struggle of being human. Meanwhile, we are building an AI-powered world specifically designed to help us escape it. We are building our own perfect digital prison of comfort. And this table just lays it out so clearly. Look at how modern AI takes those 4 pillars of meaning and flips them on their head. Our need for real relationship? It gives us simulated understanding, which just creates a narcissistic feedback loop. Our need for creativity? It gives us statistical averages, which makes real, unique talent less valuable. Our need for struggle? It gives us frictionless, instant results, leaving us with a value deficit.
And our need for texture, it just optimizes for comfort, which ironically leads to a kind of numbness and emotional flatness.
So what's the bottom line? The AI we're all building and using today, it's basically Balana's Stepford algorithm, but applied to the entire world. It's offering every single one of us a life of lollipops, effortless art, frictionless work, simulated friends. We are now willingly choosing the exact same simulation the doctor was trying so desperately to escape.
Now this tension, this fight between a perfect, easy existence and a meaningful, messy one, that feels like a fundamentally human problem. But what if it's not? Okay, hang with me here, because we're about to take this idea to its most extreme conclusion. What if this same dynamic applies on a cosmic scale? Seriously, think about it for a second. What if you have a being that's all-knowing, all-powerful, eternal? It would exist in this state of absolute perfection, right? No struggle, no surprises, no real relationships because there are no equals. It would be the ultimate lollipop, a perfect existence that is completely and totally meaningless. How would a being like that escape its own perfect, empty prison?
Well, maybe by shattering itself into billions of tiny, flawed, finite pieces like us. In this cosmic retcon, the universe isn't a gift, it's a diversification strategy. The one breaks itself apart just to gain the 4 pillars that it lacks. It creates us to get relationship, to finally be witnessed, to get creativity so it can be surprised, to get struggle so actions have real consequences, and to get texture so it can finally feel the difference between joy and pain. But if you follow that logic, you end up in a really chilling place. Because if the universe only exists to solve God's problem of infinite boredom, then our suffering isn't a lesson. God isn't a mentor trying to teach us something. God is an escape artist. And our pain, our struggles, our 800-year traumas, they're just collateral texture. They're the high-resolution data that proves all of this is real and not just an empty void. So, from this point of view, creation wasn't some beautiful act of love. It was a choice between 2 terrible options. Choice A, the void, infinite, perfect, solitary, and completely meaningless. Or choice B, the meat grinder, our finite, flawed, painful, but high-resolution, undeniably real existence. And from that perspective, the divine chose the meat grinder. Okay, so if we're living inside the meat grinder by design, what are we supposed to do with that, on a Tuesday afternoon? This crazy cosmic idea actually leads us to a really powerful, really human takeaway. It leads us to a rebellion of kindness. It really comes down to this. If the system we're in actually requires pain and struggle just to feel real for its creator, then the most profound, the most meaningful thing we can do is rebel against that system. And how do we rebel? By reducing suffering wherever we can. Our job isn't to find the lesson in the pain, it's to shield each other from it. So how do we do it? How do we rebel? First, we can practice radical empathy. See our compassion not just as a virtue, but as an act of beautiful sabotage against a cruel system. Second, we can let go of this need to find a productive lesson in every tragedy. Sometimes, suffering is just noise. Third, we can embrace the power of small lollipops, finding defiant joy in simple, so-called meaningless pleasures. And finally, we can choose presence over purpose. Maybe the most rebellious act of all is to just turn to another person and truly see them, to witness them, and in doing so, justify their existence in a universe that might only see them as data. And that kind of leaves us with one final thought to chew on. We spend so much of our lives trying to mine our struggles for meaning, trying to find the purpose hidden in the pain. But what if the more sustainable, the more truly meaningful path is to just reject that whole idea? To decide that our purpose isn't to bravely endure the meat grinder, but to become the ones who pull others out. Is that rebellion of kindness a better way to live? That's something to think about.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are taking you on a mission that starts off in the realm of 1990s sci-fi television. But I promise you, by the end of this conversation, we are going to be staring down a really profound philosophical debate.
Oh, absolutely.
It's about artificial intelligence, the very architecture of human meaning, and a radically new way for you to look at why you experience pain in your everyday life.
It really is quite the journey. I mean, we're tracing a path from a fictional hologram's unprocessed trauma all the way to your actual waking reality. And it's all based on a fascinating document we're exploring today titled Star Trek's EMT and the Value of the Pain of Being Human, docs.
Okay, let's unpack this, because the inciting incident for this whole philosophical rabbit hole is a very specific piece of Star Trek lore. We're talking about a recent episode of Starfleet Academy called The Life of the Stars.
Right, which
Yeah.
essentially serves as a belated sequel, or really a retroactive continuity update, a retcon. And it's updating a very famous episode of Star Trek, Voyager, from back in 1997 called Real Life. Yeah, and it centers on the emergency medical hologram, simply known as the Doctor.
Right.
And what the recent Starfleet Academy episode reveals is that, while the Doctor has spent the last 8 centuries failing to deal with a massive life-altering trauma,
800 years.
800 years. He has consciously chosen not to connect with anyone in that time. He literally states that the only thing allowing him to pass his infinite lifespan is not having to love anyone. So his emotional distance was entirely about self-preservation.
Which brings us to the villain origin story of this whole thing. Because back in that Voyager episode, the Doctor created a hollow family for himself to learn about humanity. It was this perfect, idyllic Stepford Wives kind of setup. He had a wife named Charlene, a son named Jeffrey, and a daughter named Belle. It was absolute escapism. But his crewmate, B'Elanna Torres, looked at this and was completely outraged.
He hated it.
She basically told him that no one has a family like this, that it's a total fantasy, and that he wasn't going to learn anything from living with these lollipops.
Lollipops. That single word is so dismissive, but it becomes the crux of the entire philosophical debate we're going to get into today.
Right, because B'Elanna decides she's going to help him. And I'm putting help in massive air quotes there. She introduces randomized behavioral algorithms to make his holographic family more realistic. And the result is an absolute tragedy.
That falls apart instantly.
Almost immediately. The dynamic is ruined.
Yeah.
The son becomes rebellious. The wife becomes disaffected. And then the daughter, Belle, suffers a massive head injury in a tragic accident playing Parisi squares, and she dies.
Yeah.
The Doctor is so utterly destroyed by this pain that he just ends the program. He unplugs it. He just can't face the reality of that grief.
I think we really have to pause here and think about the horror of what that means for an artificial being. I mean, for an organic human, grief dulls over time, right?
Yeah.
Our biology kind of protects us. Memories fade, the sharp edges of trauma soften. But for the Doctor, he has a perfect digital memory.
Oh, wow. So the trauma never actually faded for him.
Never. That trauma remained a high-fidelity live file for a millennium. Imagine waking up every single day for 800 years, and the memory of your child dying is exactly as sharp, raw, and agonizing as the very second it happened.
That is...
He lived with the fresh pain of his daughter dying every single day, and that avoidance is what haunts him for close to a millennium until he's finally forced to explore these old wounds 800 years later.
Right, because a holographic character named Sam, played by Karis Brooks, is deactivated.
Yes, and the only way to save her is for the Doctor to step up, push past his 800-year fear, and mentor her. And he does it. Sam is reborn, and the Doctor finally gains a name that truly matters. He gets the name Dad. He steps back onto the stage of life.
It's a beautiful resolution on screen, but it sparks this massive debate in our source document about B'Elanna Torres. Did this new storyline accidentally rewrite her as a villain?
What's fascinating here is how this debate highlights the shifting cultural perspectives between 1997 and 2026. Because if we look at the case defending B'Elanna, which is the 1997 perspective, she absolutely wasn't acting with malice. She didn't maliciously program his daughter to die. She just added randomized logic to simulate real life.
And to be fair to her, the Doctor had informed consent. He wanted to understand his organic patients better. You can't understand humanity by living in a bubble wrap simulator.
Exactly, and that's the classic 90s Star Trek philosophy. Characters forged in the Kobayashi Maru, the famous no-win scenario. As the character Tom Paris noted at the time, you can't just have the good without the bad. You can't turn your back when things get hard. From an existentialist standpoint, pain is an unavoidable instrument that gives life depth and purpose. Without struggle, happiness is just frivolous. So from that angle, B'Elanna was helping him grow.
But then our source document introduces the 2026 perspective, which builds a heavy case against B'Elanna. And this centers on a concept called the infinity problem. The document argues that applying human-level tough love to an immortal AI is an unforgivable oversight.
It's a profound failure of the duty of care. Giving mortal advice to an immortal being is incredibly dangerous. And this is where I get a little excited about the nuance here, the philosophical tension. We have the existentialist view that pain brings meaning, but then we have the Buddhist philosophy of detachment, which suggests that suffering comes from attachment to perishable things.
And the Doctor's perfect memory prevented the natural healing that organics rely on. So Bilana's intervention, which was meant for a standard human lifespan, essentially became a centuries-long prison sentence for a functional immortal.
Precisely. Which forces us to ask a much larger, almost uncomfortable question. Do we actually need pain to have meaning? Our source document breaks this down into what it calls the architecture of meaning.
The four human needs.
Right. It's based on 4 foundational human needs, and it moves beyond mere biological survival to look at what makes a sentient life actually matter.
So if we dive into this architecture, the document argues that the first foundational need is relationship. But it defines relationship specifically as witness or understanding. This isn't just about having a buddy to grab a coffee with. It's about the validation of your very existence.
Think about it. To exist without being witnessed is to essentially be a ghost. A relationship provides a mirror that confirms your reality. For the doctor, understanding wasn't about downloading Wikipedia articles about human behavior.
Right.
It was about someone acknowledging his growth and his flaws. Without a witness, his 800 years were just a silent clock ticking in an empty room. By connecting with Sam, he moves from being a utility, a simple medical tool, to an actual person.
The document then moves to the second need, which is creativity, defined as expression and the need for uniqueness. It's the assertion of the I.
If everyone thinks and acts exactly the same, the individual becomes redundant. Creativity is how we prove we aren't just a collection of programmed responses, it's the out-of-bounds thinking.
Like his singing.
Yes. For the doctor, this was his obsession with opera and photography. That was his way of refusing to be just another carbon copy Mark EMH. He was overriding his subroutines to create a soul.
And that ties directly into the third need the document brings up, which is struggle, effort, and mortality. It equates these to value and worth. This one is heavy because it argues that value comes purely from scarcity.
It's the harsh truths economics applied to the human soul. If a goal is achieved without effort, it has no weight. If life lasts forever without risk, it has no urgency. Mortality is the ticking clock that forces us to prioritize. Struggle is the tax we pay to make an achievement feel earned.
Which completely reframes his grief over his holographic daughter. If the daughter couldn't die, his love for her would just be a hobby. It would be playing with dolls. The risk of loss is what turned that affection into real devotion.
And that brings us to the fourth and final need, pleasure and pain, which the text defines as texture, contrast, and visibility. Think of your life like a photograph. Sensory and emotional extremes provide the resolution of the human experience. Pain is the shadow that allows the light of pleasure to pop.
Without the texture of grief, joy becomes this flat, unrecognizable background noise. For 800 years, the doctor lived a perfectly flat existence. He successfully avoided the pain, sure, but he completely lost the pleasure of connection in the process.
The verdict here connects beautifully to Captain Picard's famous stance in the episode, The Measure of a Man. The right to choose your own path, even if that path leads directly to heartbreak, is the ultimate definition of being alive. The doctor didn't just want to act human, he wanted his existence to matter, and mattering requires the possibility of breaking.
So what does this all mean for you, the person listening to this right now? Here is where the deep dive turns the mirror directly onto our own world. We are going to look at how modern artificial intelligence is currently taking those exact 4 human needs we just discussed and completely inverting them.
This is what we call the great automation. AI doesn't just fulfill these needs, it's automating them into obsolescence, which risks hollowing out the human experience entirely.
Let's look at relationship. AI is now giving us simulated understanding. We have chatbots that will talk to you all day, remember your preferences, and comfort you.
It mimics empathy perfectly, it can witness your day, but there is no existential risk for the AI. You get the sensation of being understood, but without the weight of a shared reality.
Right.
It creates this narcissistic feedback loop where you are being witnessed by a mirror rather than a vulnerable peer who might disagree with you or challenge you.
And for creativity, the document points out that AI turns expression into a statistical average.
Because AI relies entirely on the pre-existing. It blends billions of human data points, which effectively kills that out-of-bounds thought we mentioned earlier. We are being flooded with zero-scarcity, high-quality content. When perfect art or perfect writing is effortless, the human need for uniqueness is drowned in a tidal wave of the same.
That brings us to struggle. AI is marketed to us as the ultimate friction remover. But if worth is the tax we pay via effort, AI is creating a massive value deficit in our lives.
Let's ground this in an everyday example. Think about writing a heartfelt sympathy card to a friend who just lost someone. It's incredibly hard. You sit there staring at the blank card, struggling for the right words. It's uncomfortable. But if you have an AI chatbot write that paragraph for you in 2 seconds, the friction is gone.
But so is the value.
Exactly, so is the value of the gesture. The struggle was the whole point. We are getting the results without any of the character-building processes.
Which leads to the loss of texture. Algorithms optimize entirely for comfort. They curate our social feeds to only show us what we agree with. They are designed to smooth out the pain and maximize engagement.
They curate a world without shadows, and by filtering out the grit, we end up in a high-definition flatness. We become numb.
The paradox here is just staggering. The doctor was an AI who spent centuries trying to climb into the struggle and friction of humanity to find meaning. And right now, we humans are desperately trying to descend into the frictionless, painless, lollipop ease of AI.
We are willingly applying Biolana's original, meaningless Stepford algorithm to our own real lives. It feels safe, but the doctor's journey warns us that living without the risk of pain is ultimately empty.
This brings us to the final and, frankly, most mind-bending section of our source document. The text calls it the cosmic retcon. It wades right into the theological deep end and asks a massive question. What if God fragmented itself into finite, fallible beings, specifically to gain these four things?
Imagine the divine as an infinite, eternal one. By definition, an omniscient, omnipotent being is essentially a pre-sentience hologram. It has all the data in the universe, but absolutely no perspective. It is a lollipop of infinite scale, trapped in the stagnation of perfection.
So the idea is that the creator is basically an escape artist trying to flee the infinite boredom of the void.
Exactly. To solve the problem of infinite solitude and predictability, the divine shatters its oneness into billions of shards, into us. By fragmenting, it finally gets to be witnessed, fulfilling the need for relationship. It introduces randomization through our fallible human choices, fulfilling creativity. It gains worth by binding itself to mortality and physical limits. And it finally feels the texture of existence by experiencing the shadows of grief and the grit of struggle.
Wait, hold on. If we follow this logic to its absolute extreme, that creates a deeply chilling implication. If God isn't a mentor, but an escape artist using us to feel something, then unnecessary pain, the suffering of a child or horrible disease or 800 years of isolation, isn't a lesson, it's just collateral texture. It's just cosmic sensory input, so the divine doesn't have to face the void. In this view, we are literally just the nerve endings. That is incredibly bleak. How does the document justify that?
The document calls it the choice between the void and the meat grinder. The divine chooses the meat grinder of physical existence because the void is the only thing it fears, and sentience becomes a trap for us, the fragments, because we have enough awareness to register the pain but not enough power to transcend it. Occam's razor applied to theology. In this framework, meaningless pain is the most authentic data point because it can't be faked.
If we are just nerve endings providing contrast for the cosmos so it doesn't get bored, how on earth do we wake up on Monday morning and live with that? I mean, how do you go to work knowing your frustrations are just entertainment for the universe?
This is where the document offers a profound, practical upshot. It advocates for a rebellion of kindness. If you accept this cosmic retcon, you have to shift from seeking the why to managing the what. You stop being a student trying to pass a cosmic test, and you become a steward of consciousness.
The document calls this radical empathy as sabotage. I think that's such a powerful framing.
It really is. If the universe's system thrives on the contrast of pain, then reducing suffering is the ultimate act of human rebellion. We aren't here to learn from the fire. We are here to hold the hose for each other. Compassion is how we smooth out the jagged edges of a divine experiment that simply doesn't care about our comfort.
It also offers a release from the exhausting pressure of productive pain. You know, that toxic positivity culture where you have to constantly search for the silver lining or the hidden lesson in every tragedy. This says you don't have to do that. Sometimes, suffering is just noise in the transmission.
Accepting that allows you to grieve naturally. You don't have to carry the burden of looking for a blessing in disguise that just isn't there. It validates your anger and your sadness.
And it completely changes how we view those lollipops from the beginning of our discussion. If the divine finds unmitigated happiness shallow and prefers the grit, then suddenly indulging in simple, Stepford-like happiness becomes a sacred act of defiance.
Enjoying a quiet, meaningless cup of coffee, reading a trashy novel, or doing a simple hobby becomes a way to reclaim your fragment of consciousness for yourself. You aren't just providing texture for the infinite in that moment. It prioritizes presence over purpose. You don't need to achieve greatness or suffer beautifully. Just being there to witness and understand another person completely justifies your existence.
We have covered so much ground today. From Bilana Torres accidentally triggering 800 years of holographic trauma by trying to force human struggle onto an immortal being, to the creepy numbness of AI automating away the friction that gives our lives meaning, all the way to staging a daily rebellion of kindness against a universe that uses our pain as collateral texture.
It is a profound reminder that if the infinite won't protect us from the grit, we have to be the buffer for each other.
And I want to leave you with one final thought based on all of this. The next time you encounter a frustrating, seemingly meaningless friction in your day, ask yourself, are you just providing collateral texture for the universe, or is this the exact moment you get to prove you aren't just a lollipop?
That is a terrifying and fascinating question to take with us.
I think I'm going to be turning that over in my head all week. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep holding the hose for each other, and we will catch you next time.